Religiosity is also positively associated with better mental health, as seen in this meta-analysis, which looked at the data from over 850 studies. If you want a mentally healthy society of people who do not want to kill themselves, we should prefer a Christian society. In terms of charity work, pro-sociality, generating progress, keeping authoritarianism at bay, reducing depression, Christianity clearly outperforms secularism. Secular societies also do not provide replacement populations and so cannot generate progress that can endure for multiple generations. Because of all these factors, Christianity is clearly better. Now, you may think Christians are only doing this out of obedience to God, but at least we're doing something. The fact remains secularists are not doing the charity work that Christians do. And given the state of the world, a ton of charity work is still needed.
Welcome back to the channel, folks. Today, Michael Jones from Inspiring Philosophy will be making a case for why Christianity is more beneficial for society than secularism. He won't be trying to prove the existence of God, but rather the utility of Christianity as a religion. His argument is that regardless of whether Christianity is true or not, it has had an overall positive effect on societies around the world. Let's take a look.
If people became less religious, volunteering decreased. Now, it is clear that secularists give money to charities and volunteer time, but not at the level that Christians do. Christianity has been one of the greatest institutions for wealth transfer from the rich to the poor in the history of humanity, and this is often accomplished through charity and missionary work. And as noted, numerous studies show Christianity has made the world a much better place through missionary work. As one study said, in a cross-national investigation of 126 countries with over 179,000 respondents, religiosity was correlated with the likelihood of helping a stranger. People within countries with greater religious diversity and members of minority religions were even more likely to help strangers. Additionally, an analysis of data from the World Value Surveys with a total of over 10,000 respondents from 31 countries revealed that voluntary action with cultural, political, and social organizations was greater for those who attended religious services frequently. Now, you may think Christians are only doing this out of obedience to God, but at least we're doing something. The fact remains secularists are not doing the charity work that Christians do. And given the state of the world, a ton of charity work is still needed. So the data indicate Christianity leads to far more charity work inside a nation and beyond its borders. And this in turn has led to more economic progress, medical care, freedom, democracy, literacy, education, etc. When nations secularize, this will decrease, which I think we all can agree is not a good thing. So on this issue, Christian societies clearly outperform secular ones, as even the secular humanist Phil Zuckerman admitted in his book. Religiously involved individuals also exhibit greater manifestations of pro-sociality than do those who are not religiously involved. Several studies have found that religious people tend to be more charitable, more generous, more likely to volunteer and donate blood than their secular peers are. Furthermore, proliferation of religious devotion, faith in God, and reliance on the Bible has historically been a determining factor in establishing schools for children, creating universities, building hospitals for the sick and homes for the homeless, taking care of orphans and the elderly, resisting oppression, establishing law and order, and developing democracies. Meta-analyses have also found that religiosity is associated with more pro-social behavior and self-control. In an ever-increasing hostile world fueled by social media, more Christianity would be beneficial and aid in ways secularism cannot. Related to this is the issue of suicide and depression. Research that mostly pulls from sample sizes of Christians has demonstrated that religiosity is positively associated with lower levels of depression and suicide. These conclusions are robust considering multiple systematic reviews and meta-analyses have found them. One study from Switzerland relied on census data of over 3.7 million adults and the death certificates of over 5,000 suicides. It found that suicide rates were the highest among those with no religion, more than double the rate of Catholics. Suicide rates have also dramatically increased over the past 20 years in this country, and given the research tying religiosity to lower suicide, it should come as no surprise that this increase has occurred as religiosity has been decreasing. And people like my opponent have indirectly contributed to this, since he's been on a crusade to eradicate Christianity from our modern society. Religiosity is also positively associated with better mental health, as seen in this meta-analysis, which looked at the data from over 850 studies. If you want a mentally healthy society of people who do not want to kill themselves, we should prefer a Christian society. So the reality is Christianity results in better mental health, lower depression, and lower suicide rates than secularism. Now, the next issue I want to focus on is the rise of nationalism and authoritarianism. With the recent rise of Christian nationalism, many people are worried about the effects of Christianity. But you might be surprised to find out that Christian nationalism seems to be more motivating among the least churched individuals on the right. This study from 2021 found that among politically right individuals, Christian nationalism was found among those who are the least religious. To quote, "We find no evidence that Christian nationalism mobilized church-based support in the election." They also say white nationalist groups in the United States explicitly use Christian nationalist rhetoric, but those who identify with such movements tend not to be strongly involved in mainstream Christian congregations. Similar results were found in Europe. One study found that although populist radical right parties tend to advertise themselves as defenders of Christian identity and values, they do not attract many Christian voters. To quote, "PRR parties take pains to show that they are defenders of Christian identity and values, and yet they do not widely attract religious Christian voters. Our analysis confirms that paradox. As religiosity increases, the odds of voting for a PRR party instead of a mainstream right party decline." In an earlier study, it was found that anti-religious sentiment has been found to be more distressing to individuals who do not attend regular church service, and unchurched Christian nationalists are more likely to favor an authoritarian figure using populist appeals. In fact, Christian religiosity tends to aid in making one less likely to vote for a far radical right party. Now, you might ask why this would be the case, but the logic isn't complicated. When individuals on the right leave traditional Christian religiosity, they tend to keep the symbols and the cultural heritage and then reinterpret them in political ways, thereby creating political religions that have repurposed Christian symbols. As Philip Gorski said, loose from its religious moorings, religious nationalism floats free of the ethical tether of Christian ethics and drifts even further in the direction of secular messianism and political authoritarianism. Roger Brubaker writes, "It is precisely the ongoing erosion of Christianity as doctrine, organization, and ritual that makes it easy to invoke Christianity as a cultural and civilizational identity, characterized by punitively shared values that have little or nothing to do with religious belief and practice." We see similar results with attitudes towards immigration. One study looked at acceptance of refugees at the individual level, regional, and national level. Found that at the individual level, Christians, with the exception of Catholic Christians, and the unaffiliated are relatively similar in their policy preferences. However, and they also found out religious service attendance is associated with more generous policy preferences. But at the national and regional levels, percent unaffiliated is associated with more restrictive preferences. Additionally, other studies have found that greater religiosity was linked to things like personal altruism towards strangers and refugees. So it seems that Christianity works as a suppressor of political religiosity. Without it, this will increase as secularization increases. On the right, Christian nationalism. On the left, wokeism or DEI. This should not be surprising since other research has found that Christianity is associated with citizen empowerment, voice and accountability, democratic values, human rights, and lower levels of corruption. Humans tend to be naturally religious, even if a small minority can refrain from this. Removing Christianity means man's natural religious inclinations are harnessed elsewhere. And in an ever-increasing secularizing world, they are manifesting into political religions, which often results in more authoritarianism, the erosion of rights and civil liberties. So keeping a society Christian is better. Not only will we see more charity work, which results in multiple positive effects, but we will also have more freedom and less political religions and authoritarianism.
What Michael has shared with us till this point has been nothing but eye-opening. Backed with studies and facts, he has made his position that Christianity is better than secularism abundantly clear. This doesn't mean that atheists or secularists are bad people. This just shows that Christianity is more beneficial to society.
Finally, I want to look at the most damning issue for secularism. A secular culture may create well-being and satisfaction, but it would not be good for humanity if it could not sustain itself for multiple generations, because it would die out and be replaced by a less optimal culture. So any given culture must be able to sustain itself as part of the reason as to why it's good for humanity. Christian societies have historically been able to do this by producing replacement populations through sustainable birth rates, and so later generations can carry on the culture. Secularism does not seem to be able to do this. To be clear, I'm not saying higher birth rates are necessarily better. If a society produced 10 children per woman, that might create problems in food supply. What I'm saying is that a functioning society needs to at least have a sustainable birth rate. But the countries that have secularized the most and who have the most people who have left traditional religion behind have some of the lowest birth rates of any nations. In fact, as secularism has been exported around the world through the internet and media, all nations' birth rates have decreased. But secular nations are now below replacement levels. Eric Kaufman, who's not religious, notes it is the conservatives and fundamentalists who are producing the most children because of religious tenets about being fruitful and multiplying. So he predicts in a few generations, the religious will take over and the secular societies will disappear. Similarly, evolutionary biologist Michael Bloom argues that religiosity has been selected for its evolutionary advantage because it results in more offspring. A question I have for my opponent on this topic is if he agrees with his friend Richard Dawkins that the biological purpose of humanity is to propagate genes. If that is true, he should favor a religious society, since religiosity actually results in this getting accomplished. This study conducted a multivariable analysis of 58 countries and found that secularism, even in small amounts, is associated with population stagnation or even decline absent substantial immigration, whereas highly religious countries have higher fertility rates that promote population growth. Many of the modern secular nations have to rely on immigration to deal with their aging and declining population, but that means importing people from other cultures to tend to be more religious, who will go on to have more children and over time increase in population and replace the declining secularists. And also, Kaufman notes, if pious children simply assimilate into the secular mainstream, the radical effect of religious fertility quickly dissipates. So secularism doesn't seem to be something that can endure for multiple generations. It has to rely on immigration from other cultures to keep its population levels. But this means it opens it up to being taken over by harmful cultures, like Salafi Islam, where rights and freedom would be removed, especially for women. Secularism indirectly contributes to that. Even if it is replaced by something like Christianity, the point is still that secularism is unsustainable. It cannot produce long-lasting well-being or progress if it slowly diminishes. Christianity, on the other hand, is able to produce sustainable cultures that endure and have historically led to a ton of human progress, thereby making the world a better place for humanity. Secularism cannot do this, and therefore it is not as good as Christianity. Now, there are many other variables we could look at that I don't have time to cover in my opening statement, but in terms of charity work, pro-sociality, generating progress, keeping authoritarianism at bay, reducing depression, Christianity clearly outperforms secularism. Secular societies also do not provide replacement populations and so cannot generate progress that can endure for multiple generations. Because of all these factors, Christianity is clearly better. Thank you.
Well, that concluded his opening statement and this video. Anyone who would like to see the rest of the debate can watch it on Modern Day Debates channel. And be sure to check out Michael's channel, Inspiring Philosophy. Also, subscribe to our channel for more interesting videos like these, and we'll see you next time.